At first, nobody believed the Vikings wanted to conquer anything. Why would they? The pattern seemed obvious. Long ships appeared from the sea, warriors landed on the shore, valuable goods disappeared. Then the ships sailed away. For generations, this was how many people understood the Viking threat. Fast attacks, quick profits, rapid escapes. The goal appeared simple: take wealth and leave. But beneath those early raids, something important was happening. The Vikings were learning. Picture a bright summer coastline somewhere in northern Europe. A monastery stands near the sea. Farmers work nearby fields. Merchants travel between settlements carrying goods and information. Then unfamiliar sails appear on the horizon. Panic spreads quickly. The attack lasts only a short time. Soon the ships vanish. Yet the Vikings leave with far more than treasure. They leave with knowledge. They learn where wealth is stored. They learn how quickly defenders respond. They learn which rivers lead inland. They learn which regions are poorly protected. Every raid becomes a lesson. Every voyage produces new information. Most local rulers focus on the damage already done. The Vikings focus on future opportunities. That difference matters, because successful conquest rarely begins with conquest. It begins with understanding. Year after year, the Vikings gathered information across enormous distances. Coastlines became familiar. Trade routes became familiar. Political rivalries became familiar. Weaknesses became familiar. The people being raided rarely realized they were revealing valuable information to future enemies. And by the time many rulers understood what was happening, the Vikings already knew far more about their world than anyone suspected. The raids looked temporary. The lessons lasted forever. The next change seemed small, but it transformed everything. The Vikings stopped leaving. For years, raiders arrived during favorable seasons and returned home when conditions changed. Then some groups began doing something different. They stayed. Picture a large summer camp beside a river. Long ships rest along the shoreline. Warriors repair equipment. Blacksmiths work near glowing fires. Supplies accumulate inside growing settlements. The camp becomes larger, stronger, more organized. What once looked temporary begins feeling permanent. This changes the entire situation. A raider must think about returning home. A settler thinks about tomorrow. A conqueror thinks about next year. That difference creates entirely new possibilities. Instead of attacking one target and departing, Viking groups could now launch multiple operations from the same region. They could gather intelligence continuously. They could build local alliances. They could wait for opportunities. Most importantly, they could survive the winter. That single change shocked many opponents, because traditional defenses often assumed enemies would eventually leave. Now some of them remained. Picture local rulers receiving reports that Viking camps still exist months after expected departure dates. Concern grows. Questions multiply. What are they planning? How many more warriors will arrive? How long will they stay? Nobody knows. Uncertainty spreads, and uncertainty becomes dangerous. The Vikings understood that permanent presence creates advantages temporary visitors never possess. Every month spent in a region improved their knowledge. Every season increased their experience. Every successful camp strengthened future ambitions. What began as temporary activity slowly evolved into something much larger. The line between raiding and conquest was starting to disappear. As Viking ambitions grew, so did their armies. This was another turning point. Picture a busy Scandinavian harbor during summer. Ships arrive from multiple regions. Warriors gather from different communities. Supplies are loaded. Weapons are inspected. Leaders hold meetings beside crowded docks. Something bigger is being organized. The early Viking raids often involved relatively small groups. Conquest required something different. It required coordination. It required leadership. It required planning. The Vikings became increasingly skilled at combining these elements. Large forces created opportunities that smaller groups could never achieve. A stronger army could challenge fortified settlements. It could control important rivers. It could pressure entire regions instead of isolated targets. The scale of operations continued growing, and with greater scale came greater confidence. Imagine local rulers hearing reports that hundreds of warriors are gathering, then thousands. The threat no longer resembles earlier raids. It resembles invasion. This changes how everyone reacts. Defenders become nervous. Allies become cautious. Merchants worry about trade routes. Communities prepare for uncertainty. The psychological impact becomes almost as important as military strength. People fear what they do not fully understand. And many rulers struggled to understand how rapidly the Viking threat was evolving. The enemy they thought they knew no longer existed. A new version had emerged, more organized, more ambitious, more capable. The transformation was not happening overnight, but year by year, campaign by campaign, the Vikings moved further away from simple raiding and closer to something much larger, something capable of changing entire kingdoms. The real breakthrough came when territory became more valuable than treasure. This changed everything. Picture a prosperous summer region filled with farms, roads, rivers, workshops, and settlements. A traditional raid targets wealth. A conquest targets control. The difference is enormous. Treasure can be carried away. Land cannot. If a leader controls territory, he gains resources continuously. Food, taxes, trade routes, strategic positions, future opportunities. The Vikings increasingly recognized these advantages. Why attack the same location repeatedly if controlling it produces even greater rewards? The logic was powerful. And once leaders began thinking this way, conquest became far more attractive. Picture Viking forces moving beyond coastal attacks. They advance inland. They establish stronger positions. They influence local politics. They pressure rulers. They secure important locations. Every success creates new possibilities. Every controlled territory supports future expansion. Momentum begins building. The process becomes difficult to reverse. Meanwhile, defenders face growing problems. Losing a treasure shipment is painful. Losing territory is far worse, because territory strengthens the conqueror while weakening the defender. The Vikings exploited this reality repeatedly, and as they did, their objectives continued evolving. No longer satisfied with temporary victories, many leaders pursued lasting influence. The scale of ambition increased dramatically. What once seemed impossible now appeared achievable. Kingdoms that had feared raids suddenly faced something far more dangerous. People who expected attacks now faced occupation. The entire nature of the conflict was changing. By the end of the Viking Age, the transformation was impossible to ignore. The same people once known primarily for raids had become conquerors, rulers, settlers, and kingdom builders. Picture a vast summer landscape stretching across northern Europe. Ships move along rivers. Warriors travel between strongholds. Leaders govern territories. Markets operate inside growing towns. Settlements expand into thriving communities. The world looks very different from the days of simple coastal raids. And that difference did not happen by accident. It emerged through countless decisions made over generations. The Vikings learned from every expedition. They adapted to every challenge. They expanded every successful strategy. Small raids produced information. Information produced opportunity. Opportunity produced larger campaigns. Larger campaigns produced territorial control. Territorial control produced conquest. The progression feels obvious in hindsight. At the time, it was revolutionary. Many opponents continued preparing for old threats while entirely new threats emerged. That mistake proved costly, because the Vikings changed faster than many of their enemies. They did not remain trapped by old methods. They evolved again and again, and that ability to adapt may have been their greatest strength of all. The story of the Vikings is often told through dramatic battles and famous warriors, but the deeper story is about transformation. A transformation from raiders seeking quick rewards to leaders pursuing lasting power. A transformation that reshaped kingdoms, altered political maps, and changed the course of European history. And it all began with something that looked surprisingly small. A few ships appearing on a distant horizon, a raid that seemed temporary, an opportunity nobody yet understood, the beginning of a change that would eventually turn raiders into conquerors.